The stars shimmered beyond the crystalline dome of the Archivum Terra, a vessel drifting in deep orbit above Earth's scarred remains. Dr. Amelia Verano stood alone in Observation Deck Theta, her breath shallow as ancient images flickered on the hologrid before her. Her dark eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the curated projections. Europe, 1943, fragmented and furious. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She was here for answers, and Earth's history had never been straightforward. The question gnawed at her more than any other anomaly in the HFY records. Why had Italy, a nation once fiercely aligned with the Axis, turned on its allies mid-war? Military strategy alone didn't explain the shift. According to the Federation's simulations, Italy's surrender and alliance with the Western Allies had initiated an unexpected temporal ripple that interfered with over 17 interplanetary resistance models. Something had gone off script, something deeply human, or perhaps not. She accessed the anomaly file once more. It was classified under Pivot Node's conscious contradictions. The system AI, Avos, pulsed to life. Dr. Verano, shall I render the recorded inflection point? It asked, voice modulated to a neutral frequency designed not to distract from content. Yes, but anchor me with full sensory immersion. I want to feel the fear, she replied. The world shifted. The dome faded, and Amelia was no longer floating in sterile silence. The heat, the sirens, the stench of war, all surged into her reality like a deluge. Naples, August 1943. Buildings cracked under pressure like dry bones, and screams twisted through smoke-thickened air. Bombers roared overhead, and a young man, barely out of boyhood, dragged an elderly woman to shelter. Luca Moretti, Avos whispered in her earpiece. Resistance courier, executed 2 weeks later. His journal triggered post-war sentiment analysis predicting the regime's fracture. Amelia watched him move, every action urgent but deliberate. He didn't look like a soldier, but he carried himself like one. The weight of ideals sat heavier on his shoulders than any rifle. Her gaze followed him through the alleys to a crumbling apartment where a radio sputtered with forbidden Allied broadcasts. Inside, a woman, Giulia Neri, adjusted dials with calloused fingers. Her face was tired but unyielding. We've received confirmation. The king is making contact with the Americans. Luca blinked. He's going to betray Mussolini? Giulia turned, and for a moment, Amelia saw something raw, a mixture of disbelief and hope. It's not betrayal. It's survival. In that moment, Amelia understood the first layer of the paradox. This was not a story of national pride crumbling under defeat. It was a story of individuals choosing the improbable path forward. A royalist woman and a working-class boy, aligned not by ideology, but by exhaustion and moral attrition. Back on the Archivum, the AI triggered a secondary stream. Shall I continue forward to the breach point? Not yet, Amelia whispered, still absorbed. The real mystery wasn't the macro-political betrayal. It was the moment people realized they didn't owe loyalty to destruction. Outside the apartment, boots marched. The blackshirts, fascist militia, were conducting sweeps. Luca froze. Giulia nodded to a hidden panel in the floor, barely large enough for one. I'll stall them, she said. Deliver the message if I don't make it. No, Luca whispered, his voice cracking. We do it together. Amelia watched as they dissolved into shadows, carrying nothing but a satchel of code books and a battered radio. In that decision, a moment historians would never officially record, lay the seed of Italy's split from the Axis. The war would churn on, cities would burn, but Italy, fractured and confused, had made a human choice, to live, even if it meant shame. The simulation paused, and the scene collapsed into glowing data points. Do you see the anomaly now? Avos asked. Yes, Amelia murmured. It wasn't strategy, it wasn't betrayal, It was exhaustion meeting conscience. There's no predictive model for that. A silence fell, the kind that didn't feel like an absence, but a pause before revelation. There's more, Avos said after a beat. A separate data stream has emerged, something interfering with the base timeline, a signal buried under the resistance codes, non-human origin. Emilia straightened. From whom? Unknown, but the signal traces to beneath Mount Vesuvius. Coordinates suggest pre-war excavation, covered up by fascist archives. The dome lights dimmed again, casting her reflection back in glass. Her own face stared at her, faintly illuminated, deeply uncertain. "Prep a descent pod," she said. "We're going to see why humanity turned and who might have been watching." As she turned toward the docking corridor, she didn't know that what she would uncover wouldn't just change the narrative of World War II, but rewrite the very essence of what made Earth's people unique among the stars. Beneath the ash-laced slopes of Mount Vesuvius, the descent pod landed with a subdued hiss, expelling steam into the ancient air. Emilia stepped out, her boots crunching against broken volcanic rock and rusted steel remnants of long-buried installations. The old world felt close here, closer than in any archive or hologrid. This wasn't a simulation anymore. This was where history bled into something stranger. Avos hovered behind her as a compact drone, its blue optics scanning the terrain. The entrance is 73 meters northeast. The seismic signature matches a reinforced bunker. Non-civilian architecture, buried since 1941, Emilia moved toward the location, her hand brushing the weathered insignia on a half-buried wall. The fascist eagle, chipped and defaced, still radiated menace. A voice echoed faintly through her headset, a residual audio imprint embedded in the structure's memory lattice. "You'll never find it," the voice snarled in archaic Italian. "The truth sleeps where gods once breathed fire." She paused. Was that historical audio recorded by Allied intercept units, presumed psychological warfare? Avos replied. But this fragment is unaccounted for. It's not in any known transmission logs. Emilia placed her palm on a concealed panel, overridden by her access codes. The door creaked open with a mechanical groan, revealing a narrow corridor descending into darkness. She stepped in, the drone following with a low hum. Inside, the air was cool, preserved unnaturally, like the chamber had waited for her. The walls were lined with shelves of documents encased in temperature-stabilized glass. But at the far end stood something completely incongruent. A pulsating core of light, suspended in mid-air, encased in an angular prism that shimmered with non-terrestrial alloys. Emilia's breath caught. "That's not Nazi tech," she whispered. "No," Avos confirmed. "Unknown design, power signatures consistent with interstellar transceivers, estimated origin, pre-industrial Earth contact, potential precursor or monitoring beacon." She stepped closer. Her mind raced. Had Italy's defection in World War II been a mere consequence of war fatigue? Or was it influenced by something more? Something external? The prism pulsed again and Emilia's vision blurred. A flood of images poured into her consciousness. Visions not her own. She saw Mussolini arguing not with Germans, but with something else. Tall, shadowed figures that did not belong in any historical footage. She saw Giulia Neri, the resistance operator from Naples, holding a fragment of this very beacon in her hands, whispering to it as if it were alive. The room snapped back into clarity, and she fell to her knees. Avos hovered close. "You were interfacing. Biometric data suggests neural synchronization with stored memories. Whatever this is, it witnessed the events firsthand." Emilia stood, wiping sweat from her brow. This wasn't just a war for territory or politics. It was a pivot point in human autonomy. Someone or something was watching, maybe even guiding. She turned to a file cabinet nearby, cracked open by time and pressure. Inside were reels of classified film, journals in Italian, German, even Latin. She scanned a page. Project names flickered. Oraculum, Vigile Nero, Custode Silenzioso, Silent Guardian. One entry stood out, signed by a name she didn't expect, Giulia Neri. We found it during excavation near Pompeii. It sang to us in sleep. I think it's trying to warn us, not command us. When the Americans arrive, I will give them the fragment. The fascists seek control. But this belongs to no nation. Emilia closed the journal, her pulse hammering. She wasn't a mere rebel, she said. She was a protector of something older than war. As she turned back to the prism, it began to disassemble itself, layers peeling back like petals, revealing a crystalline sphere within. Data began to pour into Avos's core. "It's transmitting," the drone reported. "Coordinates, not on Earth." "Where?" Emilia asked. "Leuten 726-8, Avos responded. "The origin point is a system humanity hasn't reached yet, but someone from there reached us first." Emilia stared into the shifting light of the sphere. The real reason Italy had splintered from the Axis was becoming clearer. Not merely rebellion, not simply strategy. The war had become a cover for something hidden, something buried beneath propaganda and blood. And those who had listened, those like Giulia and Luca, had chosen conscience over control. Perhaps not knowing why. Perhaps guided by a whisper from beyond the stars. The chamber began to quake slightly as the core collapsed into itself, vanishing with a faint tone that echoed like a farewell. Avos recalibrated. "Energy readings dissipated. Beacon has deactivated permanently." Emilia stood, changed. The war she thought she understood was only a layer. She now held the thread of something deeper. A buried past waiting to be exhumed. She looked up at the tunnel entrance. "Let's go," she said, voice steady. "We need to find out what happened to the rest of the fragments and why the stars once spoke to Earth." Emilia stood atop the snow-laced ridge of Monte Cassino, staring across the valley at the burned husk of the ancient abbey, now only skeletal stonework beneath a bruised sky. The silence was total, unnatural. Not a breeze stirred, not a bird called. This was a place history had abandoned, or perhaps protected. The beacon fragment she'd recovered from the Pompeii vault vibrated gently in her satchel, like a heartbeat not her own. Avos hovered beside her, wings dimmed to avoid detection. "Thermal readings suggest recent excavation, human, within the last 48 hours. "So someone else is looking," she murmured, eyes narrowing. "Someone who knows." The last file recovered from Giulia Neri's journal had mentioned a convergence point, a phrase repeated like a mantra. "When the third sun rises, silence will fall." Emilia didn't understand it. Neither did Avos. But the phrase had been echoed in documents from Germany, intercepted American transcripts, even ancient Vatican records coded in cipher. She descended the ridge slowly, eyes scanning the broken remains of what had once been the spiritual heart of Europe. The shelling in 1944 had destroyed the monastery, but beneath it, beneath the relics, the legends, was where her answers now slept. Within the abbey's crypt, the stone gave way to a stairwell she had never seen on any map. Cold air surged upward, like breath exhaled after centuries of stillness. She moved downward, light from Avos's projector cutting through the dark in harsh beams. Symbols etched along the walls pulsed faintly as she passed, and the fragment in her satchel grew warmer. At the bottom was a chamber unlike the others, pristine, untouched by war or time. The walls were smooth obsidian, polished to a mirror's edge, and at its center stood a single structure, a black obelisk floating just inches off the ground, humming at a frequency she felt in her teeth. "There's no known record of this," Avos whispered. no religious or cultural precedent. Emilia stepped forward. But it's been here, since long before the war, maybe long before us. As she approached, the fragment in her bag tore free, flung itself into the air, and clicked seamlessly into the obelisk's side like a key turning in a lock. The chamber surged with power. Light filled every crevice, and a low sound, like a distant choir echoing through the bones of the earth, filled the air. And then images. Not holograms, not simulations. Memories. She saw Mussolini again, but this time in shadowed Congress, not with aliens, but with humans who had touched something alien. Scientists, priests, politicians. The war, she understood now, had never truly been about ideology. It had been about access, control over ancient technology mistaken for divine or infernal power. Germany sought it. Italy had found it. And then Italy had tried to hide it. Julia appeared again, older, gaunter, cloaked in ash and fury. She had helped smuggle the pieces of the obelisk across Europe, breaking them apart, scattering them through catacombs, ruins, and monasteries. Every side had been after her, Axis, allies, even her own countrymen. But she had succeeded. Until now. The obelisk's memory pulled back like a tide, and Emilia was alone again. But changed. They made a choice, she whispered, to preserve us. Not empower themselves. Your biometric sync with the device is complete, Avos said. You are now the recognized custodian. Emilia felt it too. The device wasn't just a relic. It was a warning system, a guardian of something still slumbering, something beneath the earth, or perhaps above it. But she wasn't alone. Footsteps echoed in the chamber, measured, deliberate. Emilia turned to face them, hand instinctively reaching for the neural stunner at her belt. Out of the gloom stepped a man in a high-collared coat, his features sharp, expression unreadable. "We've been watching you, Doctor. Elenco," he said in precise English. "Ever since Cairo, you've come farther than most." "Who are you?" she asked, pulse tightening. "Custodians like yourself, just less idealistic." Behind him, more figures emerged, uniformed, armed, disciplined, not military, not rogue, something older, a coalition buried in the crevices of collapsed empires. "We need the obelisk," he said. "Its activation sequence is time-sensitive. You don't understand what's coming." "I understand more than you think," she replied, stepping backward toward the device. The obelisk began to rise, sensing the confrontation. Its surface shimmered with code that no Earth language could replicate. "You want control," she said. "But this was never meant to be ruled. It was meant to be heard." The chamber shook, lightly at first, then violently. Stones fell from the ceiling. The air crackled with tension. "We don't have time for sentiment," the man snapped. Emilia placed her hand on the obelisk. "Neither did Julia." With a flash, the device pulsed outward, a shockwave of light blinding everyone in the chamber. When the glow faded, Emilia and Avos were gone. So was the obelisk. Above ground, snow began to fall softly on Monte Cassino again. And far across the stars, in the system of Luyten 726-8, something stirred in response.